Everyone, and welcome to chapter 13. Today's chapter, we will be going over groups and teams and how we can go about increasing cooperation, reducing conflict. By the time you're done reading this chapter, there are several objectives that you should be able to achieve. The first is that you should be able to identify the characteristics of groups and teams, describe the development of both, discuss ways that managers can build effective teams, and how managers can deal successfully with conflict, as well as describe how to develop the career readiness competency of the teamwork collaboration combo. So, why is teamwork important? Well, you'll see table 13.1, which is also in your textbook, and you'll see the various improvements and some examples. Over a quarter century ago, Peter Drucker, who's a management philosopher, predicted that future organizations would not only be flatter, right? They wouldn't have so many layers, and they would also be more information based, but also organized around teamwork. And as we've seen, that has definitely evolved tremendously over the last, 20 years. In fact, your ability to work well as a team member can affect your job opportunities as well as your success. You can also see how teamwork can influence the kind of employers that might appeal to you. There are several examples of how and why teamwork is important. You can see when we look at increasing productivity at a General Electric factory, which is GE, teamwork resulted in a workforce that was 20% more productive than their other GE workforces elsewhere. When we look at increased speed, Guidon Corp, they make life-saving medical devices. They were able to cut in half the time it took to get products to market. Reduce cost. Boeing used teamwork to develop their 777 at costs far less than what they normally were spending. Teamwork used to improve quality proved, as in Westinghouse, they improved their quality performance in their truck and trailer division and within their electronic components division. Reduction of destructive internal competition, which we see a lot, right? When you have it where you're pitting individuals against each other, when you collaborate as a team, we see that the improvement for Men's Warehouse was that they fired a salesman who wasn't sharing the walk-in customer traffic, and the total clothing sales volume among all salespeople increased significantly. So he was just gobbling up all the leads that came in, and no one else could be able to eat. He felt he was the only one that could eat. When we look at how teamwork improves workplace cohesiveness, remember I explained that's the stickability, that's the thing that keeps the teams together, keeps you wanting to work together. Cisco Systems told executives they would gain or lose 30% of their bonuses based on how well they worked with their team members. And in 3 years, they had record profits. Isn't that awesome? So, what's the difference between groups and teams? Most people use the words, they interchange them, and they think they're one and the same, but they're not. So, one is a collection of people. It could be as few as 2 or as many as 20,000. They are freely interacting. They may share various goals or norms or have common identity, right? There could be some type of collective type of performance. And then you have a team who are brought together because there's complementary skills and you have a commitment to a common purpose or specific performance goals. And you hold each other mutually accountable as you're working towards those goals. They're typically, in a lot of ways, you can say they can be, when you look at sports, for instance, I'll just give you that example. Or if you look at, goodness, well, yeah, we'll just stick with sports. Okay, so let's look at sports. You have players on a team, and the team is built around what the common goal is, right? So they want to win a championship of some sorts. And so you need to make sure that you have the best players who can perform the functions that are needed. And they have to have skills that complement each other. If you have, one person like, the salesman at Men's Warehouse who feels like they need to hoard the ball, right? If you have a ball hog, that means other team members aren't able to then, and I'm using basketball if you can't tell, other team members then don't have an opportunity to utilize their skills. So in a team approach, the team members are going to hold each other accountable for doing their part and what needs to be done. In a group members come and go. There's not anything that's holding anyone accountable to something. It could be that our group happens to be, let's say, your neighborhood watch. That could be your group. It can be that you're part of a fantasy league. It can be that you are part of a book club. That's a group. That there is the difference between the two, is that it is just something that you have in common, and with that you have this shared identity within that. So those are the two different identities between groups and teams. I'll see how well you can clearly articulate that yourself. So let's look at some formal and informal groups. A formal group may be a department, a division, a work group. It could be a committee, and a group can be temporary or permanent. So oftentimes you're assigned to them according to your skills and the requirements of the organization that you're part of. An informal group may just be, a group of friends, and or you have a shared interest and you like to hang out with each other, and that means you may take breaks or meet up for happy hour after work. It may be that you organize a prayer breakfast, or you have a bowling team, or you guys do play pool or billiards. You may have an alumni group. So it may be like former employees from, company XYZ. It could also be that you have some type of other voluntary organization. If you're a manager, as a manager, what's important to you is that informal groups can advance the plans of the formal group, or they can undercut those plans. So the formal organization needs to make efforts to, let's say, an example would be to speed up the plan assembly line, or to institute some type of reforms in the workplace. But these attempts may be sabotaged by the informal networks of the team members who meet and gossip, at lunchtime, or at the water cooler, or, on their Facebook, and instant message, or, like I said, at, happy hour after work. Informal groups can also, on the flip side, be highly productive, even more so than the formal groups. Why do you think that that's the case? That you can actually be in an informal group and be as productive or more productive than the formal group? There's an example in the textbook. It's informal groups add informal learning. It's sharing knowledge in the lunchroom and on social media. And you can see that there's, you'll see that in the chapter reading, that I think it'll be beneficial for you. Now let's move right along to the various types of teams. Now, there are different types of teams that have different characteristics, and you can differentiate some typical teams according to their purpose, duration, and the level of member commitment. And the work teams have a clear purpose. all the members share in this purpose. It's usually a permanent team, meaning that they don't disband after a few days or weeks or months. It's usually something that is long term, and you give your complete commitment to the purpose in order for the team to succeed. A project team is usually brought together to solve a problem or complete a specific task. And that could be coming up with new marketing ideas for one of the product lines. It could be rolling out a particular project, and specifically, and then after that project's been rolled out, you then go back to your normal work. Sometimes, you'll see that you could be working on a project team while you're still doing your normal duties. A cross-functional team is where you have members from different areas within the organization that are working together. So it could be sales and marketing, finance, operations that are working in tandem. Self-managed teams, you're given the administrative oversight to handle certain tasks within your domain. So it's groups of workers that can manage in that regard. And your virtual teams are working together over a period of time. Usually you have limited face-to-face contact. It's mostly electronic. So like your virtual class that you're taking here, where you're doing this engagement online, there's possibility that you can be able to meet in person, but most of your engagement is online. As we see that a lot of companies are starting to see some of the benefits to virtual teams, there are, of course, some drawbacks, some challenges, and we've been able to see a lot of that with the pandemic tied to COVID-19. There was a study that had revealed that 66% of multinational companies relied on virtual teams. Of course, this was pre-pandemic. So we, of course, know that a lot of the multinational teams, that percentage went much higher and maintained the level, a higher percentage, even after things slowly started to die down. I want to make sure that you all see this video. It's about a conference call in real life that I think is absolutely hilarious, and I'll be sure to share it with all of you in the class and see how well you can relate to it. I will show that to you shortly. Now let's look at, and let me grab this really quick. Let's look at the stages of group and team development. This is figure 13.1 in your textbook, Tuckman's 5-stage development. And managers often talk of products in organizations going through various stages from birth to maturity to, of course, decline, right? So we used to call it we used to call it death, but now they just call it decline, and where it's this graveyard effect. Groups and teams go through the same thing, and one theory proposes that there are 5 stages of this, which is the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, right? And we're going to talk about that further. Tuckman is not the only person who has, come up with the 5-stage model. This is just one of the theories that the authors chose to use to teach this. So the first stage is the forming. And this is where you get acquainted with each other, figuring each other out, figuring out why we're here, where do I fit in this group? You're focusing on giving people time to become socialized and acquainted. Mutual trust is low at this point, and there's a good deal of holding back. You're, kind of rationing yourself a little to see, all right, who's going to take charge and how. And conflict at this stage may be beneficial because it can lead to increased creativity. If the formal leader, such as, in the case of in our class, me as the instructor, if I don't assert my authority in this stage, then an emergent leader will eventually step in to fill the group's need for leadership and direction, right? So that means another student could then step in, or I could have an assistant, or there may be another faculty member, but it happens. In the workplace, you see it a lot. If the supervisor, the manager, does not assert themselves, their authority, you can see that it can be another supervisor or it can be another team member who can definitely step in and start leading and directing the group. That's not a good thing. It's really difficult to try to, grab those reins and reel everyone back in. So during this stage of forming, leaders should allow time for people to become acquainted and to socialize, but also leaders should make sure that they've established their authority over this group. In the storming phase, this is where things get tested. You're starting to see an emergence of our individual personalities. There's roles and conflicts within the group. You're trying to figure out, what's my role? Folks start fighting. This is where individuals start to test the leader's policies and assumptions as they try to figure out their place in the power structure. You can start seeing subgroups that start to shape and form. There can be some rebellion that starts to form, such as procrastination, the little talking out the side of your mouth, the eye rolling, the attitudes. A lot of groups stall in this stage because power politics will erupt into an open, outright rebellious front. So this stage can be a very short duration, or it could be excruciatingly, painfully long. It really depends on the goal and how the goal was clarified and the commitment and maturity of the members within that group. So it's important that leaders encourage members to suggest various ideas, voice their disagreements respectfully, and work through their conflicts about tasks and goals. This is important for managers, for managers to step up in a leadership role and to not shy away from disagreements and conflict, but to properly manage them. And as I've shared with you all before, that a lot of times managers avoid conflict. And so with that, you can see how it can just get out of control. The stage of norming is an important stage as well, because here's where conflicts are resolved. Close relationships are developed. So if the team breaks up, if the group breaks up in the storming stage, you never got to the point of norming. And it's important that you find a way to get to the stage, because you can develop those close relationships. You can bring about unity and harmony, and the team members individually start to ask, what do the others expect of me? And then, can we agree on these particular goals? Can we work together as a team? In this stage, as a leader, you should emphasize unity and help people identify the team goals and the values. So if you make it through stage 2, you generally do so because a respected member other than the leader challenges the group to resolve its power struggles, right? And that can happen. It can be more so than the leader that was assigned to your group does it. And sometimes it's because someone else that's been respected by the group is the one who helps say, hey, you guys, we got to get this together. And by doing so, start to get the group to resolve their power struggles so something can be accomplished. So questions about authority are resolved through unemotional, matter-of-fact group discussion, getting all the other stuff out of the way and just getting to what's the issues, what needs to be done, what are we here for, what's our mission, what are our goals, what are our values, what are we going to stand on. And from there, you start to find that there's a feeling of team spirit that's experienced because members believe they have found their proper roles. Now, this stage generally does not last long. You usually then get into the performing stage. This is where you're concentrating on solving problems and completing the tasks that have been assigned. You're asking yourself, how can I best perform in my role? Can I do what I need to do properly and to bring great benefit to the team? As a leader, you should allow members to be empowered so that they can do what needs to be done. And, the group has to really look at, can we do this? And if you as a leader stand in the way of the empowerment that's needed, then you'll find yourself back into that storming phase. Okay? You will find that you're going to get back into the fighting. So you have to make sure, this is a really important phase right here, is that the work is being done, it's being done properly, and everyone is feeling empowered to do so. In stage 5, you're starting to prepare to go your separate ways. It's the what's next. You've worked really hard, you've gotten along, you got something done, you're feeling, these emotional highs and lows. And sometimes people are feeling as though they're going to be losing out on something by now going separate. So there are a lot of questions as to what's next, and how can we help team members transition out. That is what a leader needs to focus on, is helping to ease that transition. And that could be through various rituals like celebrating the end, the new beginnings, award ceremonies and parties and graduations, and all of these different things that could provide punctuation at the end of this project. I do know that some people do mock funerals, but I just think that's just a little morbid, but to each his own. You can also emphasize valuable lessons learned in the group dynamics to prepare everyone for future group and team efforts. So these are the different things that you should really focus on as the leader of that group. So here's our very first question. Jeff's work group is having a lot of disagreement over the direction the group should take. They are involved in which stage of group development? Is that forming, storming, norming, or performing? If you said B, storming, you are absolutely correct. The rationale behind this is that storming is characterized by the emergence of individual personalities and roles and conflicts within the group. So if you put B, storming, you are correct. Let's look now at punctuated equilibrium. Figure 13.2 in your textbook shows this model by Tuckman. It shows, well, let me put it this way. It shows that groups don't always follow Tuckman's model. And it often occurs in the wake of unexpected change. So back in 2016, June of 2016, there was a slim majority of voters in the UK, the United Kingdom, who voted in favor of leaving the EU, the European Union. So this was Brexit, right? Here's an example of this. The remaining 27 member countries faced major changes in the economic and political stability of the 23-year-old Economic and Trade Group. And alterations in the way that they trade, how they share resources, how they maintain peaceful borders were expected to develop over many years as the EU remakes itself. Because now you have one of Europe's largest economies that decided to break away from them. And when you see and so you see where UK decided they're not going to follow Tuckman's model. So with this, you see that the EU now has to establish groups have to establish periods of stable functioning until an event causes a dramatic change in norms, roles, or objectives. So with Brexit, it caused this dramatic change. And then you have to establish and maintain what the new norms will be to function and return things to equilibrium. When we look at the world of retailing, an example of this would be Walmart. Walmart has their low price approach, and that was changed. That was a change that revolutionized an industry, right? This low price approach, which of course caused a lot of disruption because it undercut a lot of our smaller businesses. We then see who comes in fast, many years after Walmart was founded, is Amazon. And Amazon is coming in with their low price, being able to get things to market, to your front door way faster than Walmart. And Walmart's trying to find a way to be competitive. Of course, they have their advantages of having the on-site locations, but at the same token, Walmart has a disadvantage in the fact that not all of their stores carry on site what you can get online. And if you see that the item is available at Amazon for the same price or less, and you can get it faster than Walmart, my goodness, look what can happen to Walmart in that type of friction. So companies and teams that can adapt will realize tremendous new opportunities, but those that don't often find themselves obsolete. And so we see this with the Circuit City. We see this with, some other giants that we never thought, the Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster really did not think Netflix had, the type of pull that it would gobble up the market share that Blockbuster was enjoying for so long. So punctuated equilibrium can drive significant change, development, and opportunity. When we look at building effective teams, the most essential consideration in building a group into a team is making sure that we have collaboration, trust, performance, motivation, composition, roles, norms, and effective team processes. We have to ask ourselves, what is a high performance team? So I'm going to ask you that. What is a high performance team? In your own words, what do you think that would be? Now, current research and practice suggests 7 attributes: shared leadership, accountability, sense of common purpose, trust and open communication, clear role expectations, early conflict resolution, right? Not when everything is going bananas, but very early conflict resolution, nipping things in the bud. And of course, collaboration. This is then, when you look at a future manager, the very first thing that you have to realize is that building a high performance team is going to require a lot of work. But the payoff will be stronger, better performing, greater work units. The most essential consideration in building a group into an effective team are the 8 things that I have read through on the slide. Each of these will be discussed in greater detail in just a second. So let's go ahead and go with the first one, which is collaboration and trust. Human collaboration has a long history with some hunter-gatherers, right? So you can look at the hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, that's in Africa if you didn't know, who lived much as humans did about 10,000 years ago. And they're linked in social networks very much like ours, without the cell phones and of course the other connections, right? Without that technology. As you might expect, teams are more effective when members collaborate. So many factors can influence this, such as how teams are rewarded. Trust is defined as a reciprocal faith in others' intentions and behaviors. So it's a support in, a belief in other people's intentions and behaviors. And the word reciprocal emphasizes the give and take aspect, right? And we tend to give what we get. Trust begets trust. Distrust begets distrust. Trust is the base, the foundation of what we need for credibility. It is literally based on credibility and how believable you are based on your past acts, your character, your integrity, your follow through on your promises. As you might expect, there's been plenty of research that supports that a positive relationship between team members, trust, and team performance is definitely validated by this understanding. So there's an example in the textbook. It's called Building Trust Starts with Leader Behavior. Definitely read that and see how, showing vulnerability is a strength versus a weakness. Some of you may see it as a weakness, but vulnerability and the ability to be vulnerable is what helps to build that trust. People don't follow someone into battle that if that person's does not share their heartache, doesn't share their fear, doesn't share their battle wounds, doesn't share the sides, the inside, right? What's from the heart. That requires vulnerability, and that is what builds the trust. That's why you have men and women that say, I'll go wherever you say because I trust you, because I've seen that you walk the walk. I see that you've rolled up your sleeves and you were in the trenches. So that is how that trust is definitely built upon and enhanced. Performance goals and feedback. Now, with that, as an individual, you of course prefer to have, various measurable goals and have feedback about your performance, hopefully. And if not, then you shouldn't want to even see your grades posted. You should just take the class without being concerned. So, right? I'm just saying, there's no Professor Foreman, what's my grade on this? Or why did I get this grade? You really wouldn't care about your feedback. You wouldn't have goals about graduating and transferring or anything else. Well, the same is true with teams. Teams are not just collections of individuals. They're individuals that are come together for a collective purpose, and that purpose needs to be clearly defined. It needs to be specific, measurable, with performance goals, and it needs to have continual feedback to tell them how well they are doing, or if they've deviated, how they can get back on track. There's an example, and an obvious example are that, teams you see on television, right? So I mentioned, basketball, but there's also car racing. So it could be, the Indy 500. It could be, any of the F1 series. When the driver guides the race car off the track, to do their pit stop, a team of people have been so finely disciplined in and trained to quickly put that car up on a jack, change the tires, refuel the tank, they clean the windshield in a matter of seconds. And it's even faster when it's F1 racing, right? The performance goal is to have the car back on the track as quickly as possible because you don't want to lose those seconds of time. The number of seconds of elapsed time will then push that driver further behind their competition when they get their car back on that track. The driver's place among their competitors, the number of seconds that have elapsed, tells the team how well they're doing. So if you then see that it took you 10 seconds and it should have taken you 4 seconds, or it took you 30 seconds, that lets you know where your car is in relation to the competition. That is that type of feedback, and that's what you then can learn from and train on for future races. Now, when we look at motivation and team composition, being mutually accountable, remember we talked about that earlier, that mutual accountability to your other team members, rather than having a supervisor make, kind of put their things in, it builds a level of trust and commitment. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I'm making sense of this. If you are mutually accountable to each other, not just to your supervisor, not with your supervisor kind of having their hand all over it and you're only accountable to the supervisor, but being accountable to the members of the team. It's great when your supervisor is part of that team dynamic, if they create a team-oriented environment where You see them as part of the team, not just over the team, but having that mutual accountability to your other team members helps to build that mutual trust and a commitment. And a key part in motivating members for their team effort can be built on that. So it's fostered by having members share accountability for the work and authority over how goals are met. They are given discretion over which resources are used, and they have ownership of the information and the knowledge to that work, that they're, the related work. So there's a level of team interdependence. So they can rely on their common task-related inputs as a team and the amounts of the interpersonal interactions they need to complete the work. The composition is going to reflect the jobs and personalities and values and skills and experiences of each of the members. And of course, your team will perform better when the members have a higher tolerance for uncertainty and they possess high levels of emotional stability and that their backgrounds are very diverse. There was a recent study that over 7,000 teams showed that interdependence affects team functioning. That then influences team performance. The key takeaway from this study is the reinforcement of the need for team leaders to monitor the quality of that interdependence amongst those team members. The most important idea to remember is team member composition should fit the responsibilities of the team. Fit enhances effectiveness. Misfit, right? If it is not properly fitted, it's not aligned, it will impede effectiveness. It will make things ineffective. So you have to have a good fit. It's like putting on a shoe that's too small or too big. It's just going to impede your progress, right? You're going to either be walking around with, crammed hammer toe feel, or you're going to be flip-flopping through, and you're going to have blisters all on the back of your feet, the sides of your feet. They're going to be sweating like crazy. You're going to probably trip and fall. You see, it's not a good fit. So you have to make sure that there is a good fit to make sure that you're effective at what you need to do. When we look at our team roles, a task role, task-oriented role, they consist of the behavior that concentrates on getting the team's task done. So your role is a socially determined expectation of how you should behave in a specific position. That can be personal or professional, right? Your role in your household, in your marriage, in your family, your role in on a team, your role within an organization. There's task roles that consist of the behavior that concentrates on getting the task done. So there could be an information seeker, opinion giver, someone who's going to help coordinate, evaluate, someone's going to record. Your maintenance roles consist of the behavior that fosters the constructive relationships. So it's the person who's the compromiser, the harmonizer, the follower, the person who sets the standards, the person who is always encouraging everyone. The maintenance role, which is also called the relationship-oriented role, consists of those behaviors that help with the form those constructive relationships. Here's the next question. Layla works during her meeting to pull together the ideas of her committee members into a coherent whole. Layla is performing which role? Is it A, maintenance, B, relationship-oriented, C, task, D, social? If you said C, task, you're correct. The rationale behind this is a task role involves concentrating on getting the team's task done. So you can see that Layla is working during her meeting to pull together the ideas that the committee have shared to bring it all together into a coherent wholeness. She's focused on the task, getting their team's task done. All right. Let's look at team norms. Norms tend to be enforced by either group or team members, and there are 4 specific reasons. Norms are the guidelines or the rules of behavior that we follow. The reasons for this usually is to help the group survive. So don't do anything that's going to hurt us. An example of this would be the manager of your team or group that might compliment you because you've made sure it has the right emergency equipment. So you're going to make sure that we won't get hurt. To clarify role expectations, and something would be, you have to go along to get along. An example of this would be at one time, new members of Congress wanting to go against the system by which important committee appointments were given to those with the most seniority were advised to go along to get along. Go along with the rules in order to get along in their congressional careers. See how that can be? The third is to help individuals avoid embarrassing situations. Don't call attention to yourself. An example of this might be you might be ridiculed by fellow team members for dominating the discussion during a report that was given to senior leaders, and they told you be a team player, not a show off. Or you might be told not to discuss religion or politics with customers because their views may be different than yours, and they want to avoid embarrassing situations. And then lastly, we have to emphasize groups' important values and identity. And that may be, we're known for being special. An example of this would be Nordstrom's department store, that they emphasize the great lengths to which they go in customer service. And some colleges give an annual award to the instructor whom students vote best teacher. Those are 2 examples. Effective team processes. There are 3 activities that teams can use to improve team processes. And a team process are where members' independent acts can be converted into inputs to outcomes through cognitive, verbal, and behavioral activities that are directed toward organizing task work so that the collective goals of that team can be achieved. And 3 ways that you can improve is to create a team charter. And this outlines how a team will manage the teamwork activities. It represents an agreement amongst the members as to how the team's going to work as an empowered partnership in making the decisions that will bind them moving forward, how they'll go about sharing accountability for delivering the quality or products and services that they're offering so that they can meet or exceed the user or customer's needs. The second thing is to engage in team reflexivity. And that's the process in which team members will collectively reflect on the objectives, strategies, and processes of the team and adapt accordingly. This can help improve the performance and reduce burnout that can definitely come into play from individual team members, but also the entire team can just feel burnout and just not want to take part in much of anything. The third thing is to give team members a voice, and this reflects the extent to which team members feel free to engage in the expression of constructive opinions, concerns, or ideas about various work-related issues. So how do we go about managing conflict? Conflict is the process where one party perceives that its interests are being opposed or negatively affected by another party. It's simply a disagreement, a perfectly normal state of affairs that happens, right? And it can take form in different scenarios and shapes. It could be between individuals, between an individual and a group, between groups, within a group, between an organization and its environment. It could be internal, external. And although all of us might wish to live, free of conflict, it's just a given. And we also realize that it can be beneficial. So we need to be able to distinguish between dysfunctional conflict, which is bad, and functional conflict, which is good. Dysfunctional conflict is truly bad for organizations, for families, for neighborhoods and communities. Functional conflict, on the other hand, is really good. It's that iron sharpens iron type of thing, right? Where that friction can help um, unfold some greatness. The only way to get to the diamond is you gotta keep chipping away. So sometimes that is where that good conflict, which is the functional conflict, comes into play. When we look at the relationship between intensity of conflict and performance outcomes, figure 13.3 in your textbook shows the positive performance, negative performance, and the shift between the low to high conflict. And right there in the middle is the sweet spot, right? It's tempting to think that a conflict-free work group is a happy work group, and maybe it could be, but is it productive? And in the 1970s, you had some social scientists that specialize in organizational behavior, and they introduced this revolutionary idea that organizations could suffer from too little or too much conflict, and that they surmised that neither scenario is good. And it seems that a moderate level of conflict can actually induce creativity and initiative, and that would then raise the performance, such as what we see in the diagram. So with too little conflict, we see that there's indolence. So look at your far bottom left quadrant. Work groups, departments, or organizations that experience too little conflict tend to be plagued by apathy. There's a lack of creativity, indecision, missed deadlines. The result is that the organizational performance suffers. You see extremely low conflict has negative performance. Too much conflict on the far right bottom quadrant, you see, can lead to absolute warfare. Excessive conflict can erode your performance because of political infighting, dissatisfaction, lack of teamwork, and high turnover. So you also see in that realm workplace aggression and violence are definitely triggers of excessive conflict. Where you want to be is right there in that middle, where the top part of where the highest part of the curve is, that bell curve. That's where you really want to be. That's the sweet spot right there in that middle, where you have a good balance of conflict with positive performance. Now, there are three kinds of conflict, and we've all, of course, had confrontations, weak ones, strong ones. Someone disagreed with us, we disagreed with someone else, we didn't like their personalities, they didn't like ours, we didn't like their opinions, they didn't like ours, behavior, so on and so forth. And these conflicts often begin with this level of incivility, and we're looking at in the workplace. So I'll just say workplace incivility. Or you have it where the employees, lacked a level of regard for each other. And if it's not nipped in the bud, if it's not curtailed, if it's not diffused and resolved, it can diminish job satisfaction and teamwork engagement. And unfortunately, personality conflicts are quite common. And you see that there's recent research that reports that 98% of employees reported experiencing some form of incivility, and 50% said they had been treated rudely at least once a week in the workplace. Oops, I skipped up. Wait a minute. In the workplace, once a week. So the downside of collaboration, or the we feeling that we talked about earlier, is that it can translate into a we versus them. So now you've created these silos, you've created these us against them type of thing. And this produces conflict among work groups, teams, and departments within an organization. You can then see that there's some inconsistent goals, unclear boundaries, status differences. You start to see a lot of conflict within the organization that way. So you have to make sure that you handle things quickly, effectively, and thoroughly. We also have multicultural conflicts, and this is where you see frequent opportunities of clashes between cultures in our global economy. And there was a study of 409 expatriates, and remember, expatriates can work for U.S. U.S. company, but then be sent to work in another country. So There was a study of 409 expatriates. 14% of them happened to be females, and they were working for US and Canadian multinational firms in 51 different countries. And they identified 9 specific ways to facilitate interaction with the host country nationals. So that means if you were from the US and now you're working abroad for your company in another country. So let's say you are happen to be working in Nigeria. And so the host country nationals, there are specific ways to facilitate interaction so that you can reduce that multicultural conflict. And you see the very first one says be a good listener. And I want you to understand that this tops the list because the very thing lacking in so many US managers is this, right? They're criticized for being blunt to the point of absolute insensitivity. So being a good listener is key, is the number one thing. Being sensitive to others' needs and understanding that we have a tendency of thinking that you work for me, but you don't have needs. And every person has needs. And whether that's the needs that are emotional or financial, it could be the ways in which I need your support or I need your encouragement. But you have to be sensitive. You have to be sensitive to how people, what they need in order to learn, in order to apply, to grow. So you have to be sensitive to those things. You need to be sensitive if there's any type of learning delays, if there's language barriers. These are things that you need to take in consideration, and that this is how you build a stronger relationship culturally. Third is being cooperative, not overly competitive. And when you come from a culture like such as the United States, which is very competitive, that may not translate well in the new culture that you're working in. 4, advocating inclusive, participative leadership. 5, compromise rather than dominate. 6, build rapport through conversations. 7, be compassionate and understanding. 8, avoid conflict by emphasizing harmony. Now, this doesn't mean you don't address anything and you just let things just go under the rug. No, you address certain things, but you're saying, where's the common ground? What is it that the goal that we're trying to achieve? What is the task that we're trying to complete? Let's come together to get that done, right? And so that is what that really does translate down to. And then 9 is nurture others by development and through mentoring and coaching. So these are ways that managers can definitely build cross-cultural relationships. And then you have to be mindful of the different, the cultural nuances and the customs and the norms. And so what may be you may be familiar with in Nigeria may be something that's totally different in Morocco, and it could be totally different in France, and could be totally different in Japan. And do you see what I mean? Like all of the different ways. You can't go with an American stamp and feeling like just because you're working for an American company, you can do things the American way. You are in another country, and the workers that are sitting beside you, that are engaging with you, most of them are the host country nationals. Respect that. Respect the similarities, the differences, respect the different nuances, the norms, the cultures, the values, the beliefs, and don't try to insert or yourself and impose your way on someone else and totally reject them. But so utilizing these 9 ways right here can definitely be beneficial. How do we stimulate constructive conflict, the positive conflict? And of course, competition is a form of conflict, whether we want to admit it or not. But competition is often healthy in spurring people to produce higher results. It is a healthy level of competition, right? It's not creating that us against them, but it is just creating this healthy competition of trying to get to that goal. And a company will often put its salespeople in competition with each other by offering bonuses and awards for achievement. So that means that you may get a trip to, somewhere in Europe or to the Caribbean or to Mexico for whoever ends up being the top performer of the year. Competition may also be established by making deliberate and highly publicized moves to change the corporate culture. So this could be that you're going to announce that the company is going to be more innovative, and they're going to reward anyone who comes up with original ideas and unorthodox ideas. Without what we call new blood in an organization, it can become something that it can create what is called a level of inbreeding, because you're keeping everything where everyone is feeding off of each other. So the mind is not being stimulated by anything external. Everyone is thinking the same, doing the same, and so they're more resistant to change. You need fresh blood to come in, fresh perspectives to come in, someone that is an outsider that can bring in a different way of seeing things. They have different backgrounds and attitudes. They haven't been caught up in this bubble so long. Like, it reminds me of being part of the Borg in Star Trek, right? They just kind of share this one mindset. When you bring in fresh blood, you bring in an outsider, this is something that helps to positively rock the boat and stimulate constructive conflict. And that is why you may get really upset when your manager brings an outsider in, especially if it was to assume a role, a position that maybe you were applying for. But people from a different unit of the organization, or new hires that are coming in, they've completed for a role, or even bringing in a consultant, they bring different attitudes and styles of how they manage and how they go about working towards goals. They have different backgrounds, and they can bring a new perspective and really shake things up. They can rock that boat. Programmed conflict, which is the four things, is that it's designed to elicit different opinions without inciting your personal feelings. And so this is how you maintain constructive conflict. If you actually incite people's personal feelings, you can create that negative conflict that you're trying to avoid. So when we look at programmed conflict, it is sometimes that decision-making groups become so bogged down in the details and procedures that nothing really gets done, right? It's just like they're just doing busy work. And the idea here is to use role playing to get people to defend or criticize ideas based on relevant facts rather than on their personal feelings and preferences. So some people would call devil's advocacy. Some folks are like, why would I want to be devil's advocate? It's weird is the phrase that is used, but it's assigning someone to play the role of the critic, right? To have that negative voice come in. The voice that is going to just dismantle and tell you why something can't be done. They're going to come up with all the possible objections, just like the devil would, right? All the possible objections to a proposal, all the possible objections to your approach to something, and generate the critical thinking and the reality testing that needs to be done in order to dissect and to see whether or not the approach is best. Some people don't like that approach because they don't like their ideas being dissected and torn down and stomped on. But that is then how you can then flesh out when you're doing it without the personal feelings getting involved, right? When it's dealing with the relevant facts, not your feelings and preferences, it can be beneficial because you can now see from a different perspective. You're looking from it in different angles. The dialectic method has two people or groups that play opposing roles in a debate. And in doing so, they can better understand a proposal. So you create like a mock court, a mock trial type of scenario where you now can then debate your two different perspectives to see, okay, have we considered all the sides of this, in the ways in which it can fail, in which ways it can succeed, in the ways in which the client may say no, in which the client may just jump and hug us and kiss us and say, oh, you guys are the best thing since sliced bread. So the 5 basic, and let me go back really quick, because I don't know if any of you have ever taken part in something like this. But definitely let me know if this would be something that you would actually find beneficial in your organization, whether it's your company or one that you work for, where you can see how this could be beneficial, as long as I said there it's focusing on the facts and not the feelings and your preferences. The 5 basic behaviors to help you better handle conflict. No matter what kind of organization you work for, there's always going to be a benefit in knowing how to manage conflict. And there's 5 basic behaviors to help you deal with disagreements and keep you from having flare-ups in your groups, in your teams, so that things don't get out of control because of the personality conflicts. We have openness, where you can state your views openly and honestly. I will preface this by saying that sometimes in our way of being open, we can be crass, and you can say things, and open and honesty does not mean being a jerk. So let's be very clear with that. Equality is treating other people's status and ideas as equal to yours. You're not above them, they're not above you. Empathy is trying to experience the other person's feelings and point of view. If you can try to step into their shoes and see how they're seeing things. Supportiveness lets the other person know you want to find a resolution that will benefit you both. So you're trying to find a common ground. You're trying to find a win-win. That's supportiveness. Positiveness is being positive about the other person and your relationship. You're not tearing them down, right? You're always seeing that the benefit of that person taking part in this. My question to you is, how do you believe each of these behaviors can help reduce conflict? How do you believe that each of these behaviors can help reduce conflict? All right, moving along. There are 5 conflict handling styles. Even if you're at the top of your game, you're a manager, you're working with groups and teams of people, there's going to be times where you're going to be put in the middle of disagreements and sometimes even destructive conflict. You have to figure out how to deal with it. There are 5 conflict handling styles or techniques that you can use for handling disagreements with individuals. The first is avoiding, and the benefit, this is where you ignore or suppress a conflict, and you'll say maybe the problem will go away. The benefit of this approach is that it buys time in unfolding the situation and of course dealing with the ambiguous elements of it. The weakness of this is that it provides only a temporary fix, and it sidesteps the underlying problem. You can't brush this under the rug and it's not going to just go away. Obliging allows the desires of the other party to prevail. So you'll just say, okay, that's fine, let's just do it your way. So the advantage of this is that it encourages cooperation. The downside of this is that, once again, it's only a temporary fix, and it fails to confront the underlying problem. The problem is that this other person is not trying to find a way to compromise. They're not trying to say, okay, in what way can this be a win-win? You're just saying, I give up because I'm just tired of arguing with you. And that person then starts to grow to believe, and they become entitled into believing that anytime they argue, they're going to get their way. The third conflict handling style is dominating, and this is ordering an outcome. So you use your formal authority and your power to resolve a conflict. So you say, you have to do it my way. This is something you do, is that I'm the parent, right? You're the child. Same type of thing. I'm the boss. There, of course, is an advantage of this, is that it's speed. People immediately fall into play. It can get results quickly. The disadvantage, the downside, is that it in the end, it doesn't resolve the personal conflict. If anything, it's going to aggravate it. It's going to breed hurt feelings. It's going to breed resentment. 4, compromising, I just briefly mentioned, is where both parties, you give up something to gain something. So you split the difference. You find a common ground. The benefit of this is that it is seen as democratic, and it seems to have no losers. However, since so many people approach compromise situations with a win-lose attitude, they may be disappointed and feel cheated. Compromise should never be a win-lose type of attitude. It should be that there's a win-win. So if there's coming from that type of place, you have to fix that, and that has to be resolved. That what is the win-win? There can't be any, no one should feel like they lost anything in a compromise. The fifth style is integrating, and that's where you as the manager, you strive to confront the issue and cooperatively identify the problem and seek a solution. So you're saying, let's reach a win-win solution that benefits both of us, and that's what I've mentioned earlier. The strength of this is that it uses a problem-solving approach. It has longer lasting impact because it deals with the underlying problem and not just the symptoms of the problem. The drawback is that it can be very time consuming. However, integrating is usually the best approach for dealing with groups and teams of people. Yes, it may take more time, but you are dealing with the problem and the symptoms. You're getting it done and you're moving the group forward. We have some things to make sure that you cover for your model of readiness for a career. And you want to make sure you refer back to this model throughout the course. All right, so we're looking at your KSAO and how that ties into your career readiness and the career outcomes. So to become a more effective team member, we're remembering that effectively working in groups and teams requires the use of several competencies from the model. Teamwork, also consider collaboration, is most closely tied to concepts and models discussed in this chapter. There are two skills that we're going to address with this competency. Or I should say, these are the two skills that we're going to address with this competency. So the very first one we see is become a more effective team member. And teamwork requires the group to integrate their efforts in the pursuit of achieving a common goal. And this can be achieved if, and it can help you become a better team member. If you commit to the team, it comes down to your willingness to put the needs of others over your own self-interest. The key action is the willingness to focus on the greater good of the team. So it's not all about you, but it's about the team, and it's about the team goals and the team mission. Two is that you're supporting team members, and the norm of reciprocity, right? The give and take is a powerful social norm by which we feel obligated to return favors or assistance after someone has provided favors or assistance to us. Three is bringing positive emotions to the team, leaving our criticism and our negativity outside team meetings. Positive emotions can make people feel welcome and part of the team, which in turn fosters improved performance. Four, lead by example. We're demonstrating the behavior that we desire in others, and leadership by example creates a positive, contagious type of environment which motivates others to participate and increase their performance. Then we see the second realm of this, which is becoming a more effective collaborator, and remembering that collaboration isn't the same as teamwork. It is more spontaneous, it's less structured, and less hierarchical. So with that, we have to listen and learn, and that means that we can do so by improving we can improve this by withholding our judgment, and we ask questions and we show respect. We make sure that we're keeping our concentration and focused in the present moment. We're not going back and looking into the past and bringing up all the other stuff. And, 6 months ago, we're not doing any of that. We're making sure that everything is focused in the present, and we're remaining quiet. And that is something that is important. We have to be able to listen in quiet so that we can actually be able to learn and extract the information that's needed. The second thing is being open-minded, and this requires the ability to stop trying to impress others by having the best or brightest ideas. We have to find ways to contribute what we can and let the team decide what ideas work best, and understanding that our idea may not be the best idea. It's really that simple, right? Be open-minded. Don't say what can't be or what's impossible, and just understand that some things you just may not see it. You may not have that perspective or that background or the knowledge that someone else may have. So making sure that you're open-minded is definitely key. So with that, you'll see there's going to be some other questions pop up. If you have any questions about what I've shared in this lecture video, please email me so that I can assist you further. This has been a great time, and I hope that you're enjoying these interactive lecture videos. Have a wonderful day.